tell you a story. Do you like stories? Yeah. I do too. Let's move this chair out of my way. All right. This is a story about my friend Pokey. Pokey was walking along one day down the shady lane. Just kidding. Sorry, wrong skid. Anyway, Pokey was walking along one day when he spotted a sign that said heaven, and it had an arrow pointing to the sky. And Pokey thought, heaven, wow, I bet that's a really nice place. I'd like to go there, but I wonder how I can get there. So he thought, and he thought, and he thought, and then he had an idea. So he ran home as fast as he could to get him some wings. He was going to fly to heaven. So he rambled through everything he had and tried to find him some wings. And he came back to where he saw the sign, and he put his wings on, and he was going to heaven. And so he got his wings on, and he started flapping and flapping his arms as hard as he could, and running around and jumping up and down in the air. But nothing was working. He couldn't seem to get off the ground. So Pokey got really frustrated with the wings and threw them aside. And he came back and he looked at heaven, and he looked up toward the sky, and he thought, I really want to go to heaven, but how can I get there? So he thought, and he thought, and he thought some more, and then he remembered this ladder that he had at the house. So he ran home to get his ladder, which took him a little while to find, because Pokey had a bunch of stuff in his house. So he brought his ladder and he set it up. And he said, I'll climb my ladder to heaven. There was only one problem with it. It wasn't tall enough, that's right. And not only was it not tall enough, as soon as he took the first step, it started to break. Oh, Pokey. He got really frustrated with that ladder, tossed it aside. He was getting really sad by this time. And he really wanted to go to heaven. So he thought and he thought and he thought some more. And he said, I know what I'll do. I'll hop to heaven. I'll hop to heaven. That's what I'll do. So he ran home to see what he could find to hop his way up to heaven. And what did he find? Pokey found a pogo stick. He said, that'll do it. I'll hop to heaven on my pogo stick. But the first step he took on his pogo stick, it didn't hop. But what was Pokey left with? The top half of his pogo stick was shaped like a cross. And as he sat there looking at it, he remembered that there's only one way to get to heaven, and that's through Jesus. So he sat there, and he laid his cross down, and he bowed his head, and he closed his eyes, and he began to pray. And he asked Jesus to come into his heart so that one day he could live in heaven. Now, I'm going to tell you a story about another man that tried to get to heaven. I like stories. Now, this is the story about a rich young ruler. The Bible says that it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. Now, You're probably thinking that's kind of impossible because a camel's this great big old animal, and here's this little teeny tiny needle. Well, I'm going to use my little rope here to demonstrate. Now, my hole isn't quite as small as the eye of a needle, but it's smaller than the end of my rope. And you're thinking, that's impossible. It won't work, right? But I'm here to tell you that with God, all things are possible. Now, the problem with the rich man wasn't that he had money. The problem with the rich man was that he loved his money. He put his money above God. And he thought his money was more important than God. Now, when you have things, it could be your favorite toy, or it could be a house or a car, or anything. It could even be a friend. But if you have something that you put above God, you better be careful, because that's when sin drops into your life and you end up in knots. Now, some people think that they've got a pretty tight grip on life. And they think, I've got it under control. I'm not going to get into any trouble. Nothing's going to get in between me and God. But before they know it, here they are, tangled up in sin. And if they're not careful, they end up with those knots too. And so, they may try and try and try to get out of their knots, but they only make things worse. And they'll go this way, and they'll go that way, trying to get out of their knot of sin. But they only end up in a worse knot. So what did we learn from Pokey? There's only one way to heaven, and that way's through Jesus. And if you pray, and if you ask Jesus to come into your heart and to take your sin away, guess what? He will. He'll take your sin away, and he'll make you clean and new